Okay, welcome to episode number 73 of Killer POV. I think later this evening we are checking into a little place called Motel Hell.
Oh.
Hello.
Motel Hello.
Oh, Motel Hello, as the opening credits signify.
I'm so going to try Farmer Vincent Fritters.
Oh, yeah.
I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from Icons of Fright. With me is Elric Kane from Inside Horror and Rebekah McKendry, Fangoria.
What?
That's us,
Yes.
the cast of characters.
We are back.
Elric seemed like
Due
he
to
wanted
popular
so
demand.
badly to interrupt,
I know.
but he
You were
stayed
like,
quiet.
and
Oh, I don't know
didn't
if it's
come
called
out.
interrupt when you're introduced. When somebody says your name, ...
But you usually like to take up a lot of time so that I don't get to Rebekah. That's your
Yeah.
MO.
Everyone knows her. Everyone knows Rebekah.
Right.
Yeah,
Hard to miss.
You know, I'm just
She has so many stalkers.
notoriety. I shouldn't have told you that story before the show.
Oh, boy.
She's just full of
I have a
stalkers.
stalker. If he's listening.
Don't we all? Don't we all? So a few quick shout outs before we get into the movies that we've seen this week. Number one, and I'm going to be super brief about this because right now, because, you know, the details aren't exactly 100% public, but the facts are that the New Beverly at the moment is shut down from operations. It will reopen October 1st under new management. That's the extent of the details we know. However, Elric and I have been talking about this all week. Michael Torgan is the guy that runs it and is stepping down.
And his father,
moment.
Sherman, ran it before him.
Sherman, for
Yeah.
36 years, it's been the Torgan family. And the thing that stands out to me about the New Beverly, compared to the other theaters, because, you know, I go to a lot of them and I couldn't pinpoint it, but actually it was something you said was it's family. You know,
Yeah.
it's, you know, you posted on, I think it was Twitter or whatever, saying, you know, if you take the family out of family business, what's left? Just business.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Every time I walked in there, Michael always made me feel very special and made me feel like I was literally sitting with family. And no matter what happens October 1st, you know, I'm hoping for the best. I hope we hear some more details on exactly what the theater is going to change into and why exactly. But I want to dedicate this episode to Michael Torgan from the New Beverly and the Torgan family for just being really good to all of us.
Yeah.
You
And
remember your first film there?
first film, I think I was in town for a weekend of horrors, so I didn't live here yet, and they were doing the 5-movie Dolph Lundgren marathon. So I'm
Wow,
pretty sure
that's
that
a
was
pretty good intro.
my first time, and that's when I met Mark Gallblack, because he showed up with his print of Punisher. So that actually, you know what, that's not the first one. That was the second time. First movie I saw there was a exploitation movie called The Mothers,
Yeah, I haven't seen
and that
one.
was a previous trip. Yeah.
See, I was here as an exchange student. I was like 21 down in Irvine, and we came up one day, and it was a Tarkovsky double feature. So it's about as slow and arty, but it does have a funny punchline, believe it or not. There's a film called The Mirror, which is like it's the most personal film I've ever seen because it's all feels like subjective memories. And but it could have been in any order. And at the end of the movie, somebody said that they think the projectionist played the reels out of order.
Oh, really?
And no one would have known because it's so artistic, you know. But
Right.
I have such a clear memory. And then I didn't go back there again until 15 years later, or 14 until I moved here.
Yeah.
So it was cool. You know, it does feel like home. And I don't know, besides what I said to you, I don't know what the difference is because there's a lot of theaters that are, you know, a little run down and playing good movies. But that one, you just never mind. You don't care what it looks like, what shapes it's in. It's just the place you feel comfortable and it feels like home. And, you know, there's good people. Clue Gulliger's in the front.
Yep.
And
I was there.
Every
that would be,
single
I mean, I'm
time.
glad I went to Cannibal Holocaust last week because had I not, I didn't know much about the situation till then. Had I not, I probably wouldn't have gone to go again.
Yeah.
And so, you know.
But we don't know. Again, we'll wait till the official
Well,
word
it's
comes
coming
out what
back. It
happens.
will be a
And we'll
theater.
be
There'll be a
back.
movie theater showing film. For
Don't
sure.
even remember what the first movie I saw there was because for the first year that I was in LA, I lived 3 blocks from it. And so we were there all the time.
Yeah.
It was like a small group of us who like lived in the neighborhood and we walked there all the time. And there still is a bakery across the street called Cecina that is owned by Jennifer Aspinall, who did all the effects on like Toxic
Trash,
Avenger
right?
and Street Trash. And she
Wow.
runs that bakery.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
That's
we would
pretty
always
cool.
go across the street and have like cheesecake with Jennifer Aspinall. But what I do remember about the New Bev, the very first place I met Rob was standing in line there.
Yeah, apparently. What movie was it? I can't
I
remember.
don't even remember.
It was a midnight screening for
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You bump into a lot of familiar faces and see a lot of cool stuff. And, you know, when I first moved to town 5 years ago, I was working for Shock T Drop, and they hosted a lot of screenings. And I'd say, 50-50 was, Ryan would host them and then I would host them. So I have a lot of fun memories there. We did a live Dexter podcast there, which I think is, one of the biggest highlights I've ever had. I met Scott Reynolds at the New Beverly. And I just hope no matter what that vibe continues and stays that way.
And if you've never been to LA, that goes beyond that. It's like popcorn is like $2.
Oh yeah,
the drink.
You get a hot
these
dog
are the
for
kind of prices
but
you don't
you have to
see.
have cash.
Yeah. No. Now they got a credit card machine.
They also got a DCP.
I heard,
Not for long. That's
for
one
long.
thing I'm pretty sure won't be there when they come back.
Yes, exactly.
well, I heard off.
Well, we know
record.
everything. We're just
I just want to dedicate the show to Michael Torgan.
Research
and
it. You'll be able to learn enough from articles and things being written online if you're interested. But we don't want to get too political on it.
Yes, we'll leave it at that. And thank you for all the great screenings there.
Yes.
Second shout out. Just as I was on my way over here, they have officially announced that Reanimator the musical returns this fall.
I am so excited.
I confirmed it with Graham Skipper, and he said yes, it's true.
Wow.
Now I don't know when or where, but details are forthcoming. So I tweeted about it. You can follow the reanimatorthemusical.com.
Same cast, as far as you know.
Well, I know Graham's back.
Oh, I hope they bring Jesse back too.
So
He was amazing.
I hope that means that all of them will be back.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It's I'm looking forward to it. It's always a fun show, and I don't know. It feels like that's perfect for the fall.
Oh yeah,
It
for
is.
Halloween. Yeah,
So I hope it gets to travel a little bit, and more people listening to this will get to see it.
Well, speaking of musicals, I was thinking last night about how my birthday's coming up in a few weeks. And last year, all I wanted for my birthday was for you two to come with me to Rocky Horror. And it never happened.
Still fighting that battle.
Don't dream it.
So
Be it,
this
Rebekah.
year, I think I'm just going to buy you tickets and say, if you don't show up on this night,
We are not friends anymore.
it's my birthday. I'm not speaking to either of you. I'm going to sit on air and turn my back and talk to the wall so I don't have to talk
That might
to
be
you.
awkward.
Yeah, it would be, right? So you have to
Depends
come to
who the
Rocky
guest
Horror.
Could be a good show. Yeah.
So that's what I think I'm going to do this year is demand it.
I like that for your birthday, you're buying us tickets to
I know.
something.
Well, it's the only
Hey.
freaking way I'm ever going to get you there. I mean, I could hold out until you buy me tickets, or I could demand that you buy me tickets.
You're
but
the only employable one, so it makes
This is
sense.
true.
Yeah. Fair enough.
All righty. Well, we'll see about that screening. What has everyone? Moving on now.
Put that in the maybe list.
That's in the maybe list.
I'm going to keep on you people.
What is there? I've seen like 5 films this week. So who wants to go first? We've
I
seen a lot
didn't
of
see
stuff.
much, so I will. So I did the Psychotronic Film Night at Jumpcut, which was awesome because we saw a whole bunch of really interesting shorts, which were not all horror, which
Very
was kind of
diverse
fun.
was the point of that one.
Yeah, there was one called Trauma there, which I think was in Slam Dance.
Yeah, that's how I found it. I found it through a slam dance program that it's one of my favorite shorts I've seen in a while.
Excuse me, I'm still rocking the cough
Very dark.
this week.
Ethan Young was the director of that.
It was really
it's
good.
good.
That one creeped me out.
I think he's a cinematographer because I looked him up after, had no info about him, and it looks like he's more of a shooter. So maybe that was like him directing something so he could get
well, that
gigs
made
as a
sense.
shooter.
There was
Yeah,
like 6
very
lines
visual.
of dialogue in the entire
Yeah,
thing. So
and it
that
looked
was
great.
really
Yeah.
good. And so it was a fun night. Some really good fun stuff there.
Yeah,
so.
no, it's and the highlight at the end being Clue showing us this
Oh my God,
pretty.
what the hell was that?
We're watching the
Clue Gallagher.
Clue and
Showed
John and
fucking Tulsa.
Yeah, fucking Tulsa footage from a unfinished feature film that they started when they lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been
Wow.
pestering them. Part of his speech was getting up and saying that Elric's been pestering them to see it, and it started, and clearly John had brought the wrong version of it. But that's all he had. We hooked up a computer, and John Gallagher plays it, and he looks over at me with this look of, "Oh no, this is the wrong one. You got to cut it right now." And I just looked away from him, and I'm not even kidding because it was the end of the night, and I knew that I just made all these people, like 40 people, stay after a 2-hour
Right.
session of shorts, and I just turned around. And Clue, I would have stopped it if Clue had asked because he directed it, but
Right.
he said,
Well,
"Yeah,
you
well, you
showed
wanted
him.
to show it," and so.
All
It's
right.
pretty powerful.
But
I mean,
I
it's
gotta
beautiful
say-
imagery. It's very powerfully well made.
I went straight from that to a birthday party. Like I didn't
Oh, yeah,
stand
yeah.
around and socialize. I just went straight from fucking Tulsa to a birthday party. And I walked in and a couple people were there who were like, "Hey, you were just at the fucking Tulsa screening. How was it?" And I was like, I have no idea what I watched. I have no idea what it was about, but I'm really depressed.
Yeah.
And that's the best
Becca
way
doesn't
I could sum it
understand
up.
art films.
Sounds like Jodorowsky like movies.
No,
or
it's
something.
very simple. It was more like I don't know what it would be. It's not like Vincent Gallo because
It
that's
was
got
about-
a comic tone.
You could
But
tell
it's-
that it was about a guy whose life is not going very well at all, and he's reflecting on
Well,
child
it was about
abuse,
abuse.
that
Yeah,
he
it was about
endured.
abuse. Yeah, and
But-
Clue was saying it was a very personal story from his
wow.
own person. And things that I didn't know, he got up and talked about.
Wow.
And I was like, it was kind of, it was
was
definitely
pretty
a
intense.
downer way to end, but also just like the ones who get off on that kind of imagery, like Oren and people, we're all just like, oh my God, this is the best Super 8 I've ever seen in my life.
90% of it was like close-ups of cigarettes burning and people's lips without seeing who the lips belong to and things like
Mostly
that.
it's Tom, brooding.
Yeah.
Tulsa.
Yeah.
But, for
But
any,
Tom was
unfortunately,
really
it's not
good in it.
available on anything. I'd love them to put it out on something, but Clue doesn't like unfinished work, so you
Interesting.
can't blame him. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Interesting
pretty.
stuff.
It was powerful. I still don't know exactly what I saw, but it was powerful.
Yeah.
And
Fair enough.
shout out to John Holland, our friend and listener who came out from Texas.
Yes.
Which was
to
awesome.
that Shorts
He
Night.
sat with me. I was so excited.
Right on.
So,
cool.
yeah.
We take care of you when you come to town.
It was fun. And the night before, Rob, me, and John went to go see one of our friends' band play.
That's right.
So it was just a good time all around. So, and then I saw Beneath, which played Screamfest last year. This is the coal miner one.
Yeah.
Not the giant fish in Larry Fessenden's pond. This is the coal miner one. And for some reason, it played like opening night of Screamfest last year, and I had something else going on, and I missed it. But then it won almost every single award, and I was like, "What the hell did I miss?" Apparently, this movie is wonderful. And so I got it this weekend and checked it out, and it was okay.
Just okay?
It was just okay for
I'm
me.
sold. The way you did that with the high-rising lips over your gums of your teeth makes me just go, ooh, must be
It's
exceptional.
great. No, I got to say, it was a great lead-in, and it's a great premise. So the lead-in is that it's a group of miners and this girl who, she's grown up in kind of a family in a town of coal miners, but she's never been down to the well. And she's been to law school, and they've been kind of, ribbing her that she's been away at law school while they've been down. And so she says, okay, well, tomorrow I'm going down with you, which is like the lead-in for something bad to happen. And they get down there, and then there's a cave-in, which all happens within like the first 10 minutes of the movie. And then you realize that there's something else down there with them. But 90% of what happens from that point is just people running around in the dark with headlamps. And so you never really see anything. You never really see exactly.
Does it become like found footage at that point almost?
It starts as found footage. It kind of psyched the audience out, where it opens as found footage with her doing interviews, and then it quickly shifts to a narrative structure. So at first I was like, hey, that was pretty smart. They kind of psyched me out because I was about to turn it off. And, but yeah, it borderlines on found footage at that point, not because there's a camera being pointed at the characters, but just the erratic movement of the camera and the dimness of it. And the fact that everything is being controlled by single headlights on their hats.
I'm dying for us to do a whole episode of that, but we need the right guest.
What, found footage?
Like
I
just
think
a
that
real
would be great.
analysis of the whole thing from
Yeah.
start
I'd
to
love
end.
to.
Because
Yeah.
there are some, like whole movie, I absolutely love. Last Broadcast, I absolutely
Oh no, I mean
love.
it's nothing's always bad 100% of the time, but trends are always bled till they're god awful.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's always some people that really, do it well.
I was hoping to this week. One thing I didn't get to see this week was us As Above, So Below. I really would try to get to it, and then last night I couldn't go at the last minute. But I'm curious to see it. I will go just because I'm curious. I heard the setup's awful. Like the first 30 minutes are painful, and then the scary parts are actually scary. So
Okay.
That's what
who
I
knows?
heard as well.
I'm curious.
So.
Cool. Was Below
else?
on Netflix Instant?
No,
Oh, no, it's Beneath. Beneath.
Oh, Beneath, yeah.
Beneath is. It's on. It's for rent on Amazon right now. And I noticed the new Godzilla is as well, so I'll be getting that
Yeah, I got to check that
tomorrow.
out. I got to check that out. Cool. Well, I am continuing my rare video search. So two of mine were on VHS this time.
Cool.
One was the one I've been looking for, my number one, like the one film I've been looking for the most. It's a film I grew up seeing the cover of because it's kind of a New Zealand film. It's kind of I think it's shot in Australia. A New Zealand director who I met once, not knowing he had directed a horror film. I met him at a documentary he had made. It's called Next of Kin. And I saw the imagery of this when I was young, and the trailer is amazing. The trailer
box
is
cover.
all dreamy. It's got a little girl in the box holding a ball, I think. And it's very dreamy. It's basically about a woman who inherits her mother dies, and she inherits an old people retirement home, and she goes there, and then she reads her mother's diary, and all the weird stuff that happened to her starts happening to the daughter. And it's got these very great slow motion, like people who are dead in the water's face coming up, or weird little dreamy stuff. The first 50-60% I think was actually I was pretty disappointed from what I was imagining from the trailer and what I had in my head, and then the last 30 minutes was basically pretty awesome because it's really might be the lone example of really close to giallo for an Ozploitation film. There's been others with kind of slasher, but I would say this is closer to an actual giallo. The structure of it and the payoff of it is actually very similar. So I think it's probably something you would find somewhere in America on VHS. You will not find it on disc anywhere
Okay.
because I've looked before, and I was hoping somebody would release it. So it's a very interesting film. Then I watched The Redeemer, Son of Satan, which is actually a pretty major missing entry in the slasher genre. It's Code Red did put it out at one point, but it's been out of print for quite a long time. It is literally like I could put two films and give you almost the exact tone of this movie. It is Slaughterhouse High mixed with popcorn completely. Like if those two movies were somehow merged, that would basically less fun than maybe both of them in a way. But it has, I mean, it just opens with this child walking out of the water who probably is the son of Satan, and then basically there's a character just knocking off people at a class reunion of they're all like 30 something. But what's interesting about, and this is on VHS, I rented, but there was a Code Red video, a DVD. But what's interesting is I tweeted one of the best photos about it, saying I watched this whole movie and really this one image is the reason, because he turns around with what looks like a Bob's Big Boy mask and a flamethrower and lights a guy on fire, and you're like, that was pretty awesome.
That's kind of genius.
But each killing is a different mask and a different persona of the killer, so it's actually pretty fun, and it's like 78, so it's actually a prototype slasher. It's like early slasher, and so for that reason alone, it's worth seeing. I would say the drama, there's nothing, not even a moment of originality to the drama itself. But I would say in terms of the way the killer looks and his performance is pretty maniacal. And it ends in such an ambiguous, weird way of like, was it something to do with Satan or was that just a slasher film? You don't really know. And it's kind of got that bonkers vibe. Definitely worth it. I think next week I'm going to try to watch Slaughterhouse for two reasons. One, I've never seen it. And two, my wife's sister, her dad is in it. And so I've always wanted
Slaughterhouse or Slaughter High?
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse.
Slaughterhouse High, I'm a big fan of. But Slaughterhouse, that movie's Slaughterhouse.
Okay.
It's got a big guy on the cover, and I know it's on VHS there. So
I own it if you want to borrow it.
Okay, if you've got it, yeah. Her dad was like one of the main characters in it, and so I always wanted to see it. And he passed away last year, but he was like a cowboy on Hollywood Boulevard. He was the guy who dressed like a cowboy every day.
Wow.
And so, I'm curious. But anyway, so then the next one isn't a movie, but I watched this and...
Hold on one sec. Is this the next of kin that you're talking about?
I think so, yeah. I think
okay,
that's the
this
cover.
is the box cover I remember so vividly.
That wasn't the cover in New Zealand. That wasn't the cover where I grew up, but I'm pretty sure
it's a hand reaching down out of a red sky into a house.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
who
if
may
it's
have a memory
Retirement
of it.
Village.
Yeah, the Redeemer cover I recognize right away.
Yeah. And I think you would get. I think for any completist slasher, it's probably essential viewing.
Yeah, I've never seen it. I'd like to.
And I only came across it when I was research from that one was found from Nightmare USA. So I was just like reading through it, and that was one I was like, oh, I'm interested in that story. This thing is really important to tell you about because I had watched Cannibal Holocaust last week, and it's still having this real effect on me. It's been a long time since I've been like just thinking about a movie incessantly about how well a movie's made. Like, so I watched the making of this is on the old DVD, the one that was released with all the extras. I imagine they're mostly the same.
Probably,
the making of it is really good. And I thought this is a really good story. I watched Ruggiero. Everyone's being interviewed. They're all very artistic about how they talk about it. But then I'm not kidding. You know how I always talk about what's the guy from Maniac? Joe Spinell's my favorite extra documentary. Well, now I have my favorite interview of all time. Like seriously, ever. The guy who plays Alan Yates, who's the filmmaker in the story. So Alan Yates is the pop kind of mondo director. They have a 1 hour. He's not part of the other documentary. They have a 1 hour interview with him. And it's one of the best stories I've ever heard somebody tell.
Wow.
And he was cast in this thing by Ruggiero because he goes into a room. He has the right shoe size because the other actor dropped out to play the role. They're like, what shoe size are you? Didn't care that he had trained with all these great people. He's an American. So he's like the lone American too. He basically gets on a plane, doesn't get a script. Everyone just conveniently doesn't have a script, and they're all Italian. And then he's in New York, and like within 24 hours, he is on a boat somewhere in Cambodia. Not Cambodia. Where the hell is that shot? It's just Begonia, something like that. Anyway, and he's in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon, and he's slowly piecing together what kind of movie it's going to be. And the way he tells the story, there's a part where, and he's really not like, the cool thing about watching right after the Cannibal Holocaust documentary is, in the documentary, they're all going, yeah, well, there's some animal cruelty, but only the DP is really like, that was against nature and we violated nature. And I could do it while I was looking through a lens, but I feel abhorrent about it kind of thing. But this guy's just like, what the hell is this? And as it goes on, basically there's a great part when they get to the monkeys. And so he's like, there's people dying, weird stuff happening. They get to the scene where somebody eats monkey's brain, which was a real not cannibals, the real tribal people. And that was a delicacy for them. So even though it's grotesque to us, and most of the crew, he was saying, were like throwing up. When it happened, he literally had a moment where he just thought to himself, I actually think that they might kill me. I think this, no, and he was not smiling. He said, I think this might be a snuff film. And he said from that moment on, he carried his passport, all his money and everything on him at all times in case he got a chance to be near a city. And he was just like, I guess I'll just run. Like, and the way he tells the story, and him and Reguera never really talked again after that. It sounds like this was like and he was an outsider coming in, so he did not have a good experience. But he talked about every detail that the other guys had just talked about, and no one's super positive, even the trial and all this stuff. It's fascinating. But this interview, I mean, seriously, if you guys are interested in great stories, if it would be one of my favorites. If somebody just told me that story, it'd be one of my favorite stories I've ever heard. Just the way he told it. And so I just listened to that literally just before I came here. It's called the Alan Yates. And funnily enough, you know who shot it? John Gulager and Bob Morawski and Sage Stallone produced it. So it's his real name's Carl York, and it was so candid. About an actor, like he was a real actor, wanted to be a real actor, and he just suddenly was on this thing, and it's so realistic what they were doing. That his first image, he's on a boat and he hasn't met anyone yet. He's on the boat and an arm is going down the river, and he sees this arm going down. He's like, oh fuck, like I don't even know anyone I'm here with. And then of course he realized afterwards a prosthetic. But you know, it's really good. Really watch it. It's worth probably buying that disc.
Yeah, cool. Right on.
But yeah, that catches me up.
All right, so I've got 5, but I'm going to go really quick on a lot of these because we've mentioned them before previously on the show. I did a lot of catching up on Netflix Instant because a lot of the recent films that we've talked about are available there. I watched Stage Fright, the recent one, not the original Italian one.
You watched a musical?
The musical. Yeah, I'm okay with musicals. This one was written and directed by Jerome Sable, who had done a really impressive short called The Legend of Beaver Dam. I am extremely mixed on my feelings of Stage Fright. I don't know, like I found it to be a successful slasher movie in the sense that it kind of had a cool setup. Like, you know, it's a bunch of kids that go to this, what is it called? Like a theater camp or something?
Obviously, people never went to
musical
theater camp.
I mean, whatever.
I went to musical theater camp like every
year. You mean that's
year.
real? Those kind of things?
It's a theater.
Are you kidding me?
America's so weird.
It is weird.
That was the greatest time of my life. Was like all through high school. I went to cheerleader camp and then musical theater camp back to back.
I don't understand it, but I still went along with the vibe of it.
BJ will get it.
Yeah, of course she will. And I'm sure she loves the movie. But no, I'm mixed down the middle. I mean, I kind of liked it because I thought, you know, some of the kills were pretty well executed, although there's little CG touches here and there on some of them. But then even the musical part didn't bother me because like they're all excited to go to this theater camp, so it's like an opening number where they're singing about going to theater camp, which I found kind of funny,
like Glee or something.
I don't know.
Again,
never watched Glee.
You just don't get it. I mean, all of these people, it's supposed to be a joke on how they're the theater kids and their entire schools ridicule them. This is their one chance to be cool because they're with other theater kids.
But they're all horrible human beings. Like, they're all horrible kids.
You know you're alone in this room, right, Bekah?
I know.
Okay, good.
Okay.
As long as you know.
I can hold my own here.
And, even the killer, when it cuts, like, they're all singing musical songs, but when it cuts to the killer, it's like cheesy 80s heavy metal.
Oh, cool.
Like
that's
screams
fun.
a lot.
There's like things I sort of like about it, but by the time it ended, it has a pretty, I thought the ending was kind of a letdown. That by the time I got to it, I was like, all right, it's cool that I saw that. That was totally different. Not for me. But, you know.
So you take the other Stage Fright over that Stage Fright?
Of course.
Actually, I would as well, just because the other
and
Stage Fright is amazing.
I just got that Blu-ray for the other one, so I'll review that probably next time.
Rock and roll.
Nurse 3D, finally watch it in 3D. It is so weird because, you know, you guys have talked about it a lot.
I didn't see it in 3D. I just saw it on shitty.
I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Her ass.
I only saw it in one dimension.
In one dimension. And 3 dimensions is interesting enough. It's campy, it's ridiculous, and somehow intentionally they've captured that cult. It feels like an old cult movie that you can't believe how far they're taking the ridiculous camp nature of it. And it's just so exploitive in every possible way, especially of the lead character and women in general, that, you know, I watched it with a friend who was a female, and I'm like, is this offensive to you? Because I'm offended for you. I'm like, nah.
I also just that voiceover is just like,
I think that's kind of hilarious in a cult movie way.
And the opening line, I don't even remember her name, but it's like, I'm blank and I'm a slut. And that's the opening line.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay,
I think maybe
I understand where
time
we're
could
going.
turn it into a cult film.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it can't be on Arrival. On Arrival, it's
no,
DOA. It's
definitely
like,
not.
You know,
but I could see it in a few
years
being like a midnight movie, especially in 3D. The other one that I thought was really interesting, I found on Netflix. It's a documentary called Serial Killer Culture. And it
I
was
saw
done
that
by,
too on the thing. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, I checked it out. It's by a filmmaker named John Borowski, who has done several of these type of films before. All similar themes, all about serial killer. But this one is really interesting. I also have mixed feelings about it because this is such an controversial and taboo subject to begin with. But essentially, he interviews several different people that all, in one shape or another, either collect original serial killer art or create original art inspired by serial killers. They all have a fascination with serial killers. And it's interesting because some of them are it's interesting and fascinating because some of them are very articulate and well-spoke about why they're fascinated and what they do and how they create.
Didn't Hart Fisher was like one of those, like Jeffrey Dahmer?
He's one of them.
He made comics about
He did a big
them.
thing on Dahmer
he
during
did
the
Dahmer comics. There's one group there's one couple that do Dahmer tours in Milwaukee. So that's kind of interesting. Like it's stuff I wouldn't agree with what everybody does, but it's interesting to hear their perspective on it. And I mean, they cover, there's one artist that specifically does artwork inspired by the Sharon Tate murders. I mean, to hear, it's a horrible event, but to hear him talk about it, it's kind of fascinating. All the things that he interprets from Manson's side and stuff like that.
People have always been obsessed by the macabre. It's not that unusual. It's just, I wouldn't want to be one of them.
Yeah, no, exactly. But
it's a cult to worship.
If you're into that, if you're into true crime, it's definitely worth a watch. I think it ran a little on the long side, and there's certain people, like there's one duo of musicians that do like serial killer songs. Like those guys, I don't relate to at all, and I think they're kind of goofy and silly. Yeah. But some of the other ones, I thought it was like, oh wow, that's really interesting.
Those guys probably listen to Bloodcast.
Probably
silly people. No.
So yeah, check that out. At some point I'd love to do an episode on that serial killer culture. I think that'd be perfect for.
Who'd be great? John Gilmore, the guy who wrote the book on. He wrote the book on Black Dahlia and on a lot of serial killers.
Oh yeah,
older guy but lives in L.A. He's been here forever. He knew James Dean. He knew Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia. Like met her once when he was a kid. He's an amazing writer. I'll show you some of his books.
Okay,
There's also another expert that I would think would be amazing is the Death Tour here in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I've done it. It's great. And I mean, I don't get into like the weird serial killer culture, but the Death Tour, I mean,
LA's got such an interesting history of, celebrity and murder and accidental deaths.
And it takes you through the Black Dahlia and all of the different theories behind it and who was involved and where they lived. And you drive around and you're like, so-and-so lived here, but the body was found over here. And it's weird because you're like actually like driving through all these crime scenes. And he does it with a couple of other murders that happened in LA where, we don't know who it is, but here's the house and her head was found here and the body was found over here.
Also because the locations have changed. Like where the Dahlia body is now like this beautiful suburban African-American community. And I felt very awkward when I went there. Going for that reason, me and my friend are standing there, and this really nice family are trying to walk into their house, and they're like, "Oh, you guys here for the Black Guy?" And I'm like, "No." And then I realized, but it used to be an abandoned kind of field next to some houses, so it's LA keeps changing.
I've been wanting to have Bill Schaefer from Hyena Gallery on, and I think he'd be perfect because he knows a lot of the people in this doc, and he at one point sold stuff like that, but also he deals with a lot of artists that create new art inspired by this kind of material. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Also, I finally caught Proxy, which is on Netflix Instant as well.
You're still standing.
Directed by Zach Parker. I need to process it just a little bit more.
I honestly, it's a hard film to recommend.
I don't even.
This is the film that opens with a pretty severe assault of a fully pregnant woman who is very apathetic about even having her child.
And you really,
it's a very tough movie.
My best advice is to not know. Go in as blindly as possible.
Nothing about it,
just try to see it on its own. I had very mixed feelings about the movie. I'm not sure if I really liked it. I know the first portion of it, I was very conflicted because there were certain choices that I don't know. I don't want to offend Zach. Because he proves this. He's an extremely talented filmmaker. But very early on, I'll put it this way: there were things that took me out of the picture right away, and usually that's rookie filmmaker mistakes when I see something like that. However, there is such a crazy
Bathtub.
change in the middle. Yeah, all you have to say is the bathtub.
Swanberg bathtub.
There's such an insanely executed.
Beautiful. Very Von Trier. It looks like because it's slow mo and everything.
It is worth it just for that middle sequence.
And there's some surprises like after that, like with character motivations and what one character hasn't done. It's just a very unique picture, and so it's like Found. I feel like those two films will probably even end up making my top 10, and yet I wouldn't say I love or even like either of them much, but they're both very interesting, and I'm glad somebody's making horror films like that because they're there to provoke as much as they are to entertain, you know?
Yeah, and again, I'm still on the fence of whether I liked it or not, but it's worth it for the mid-movie madness, and then from that mid-movie madness
he said he'd come on, too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it'd be great to have him on. And from that mid-movie madness, just Joe Swanberg insanity is...
Yeah, him going crazy is pretty fun to see.
I normally don't like him unless he's in a movie with AJ, but he's pretty great in this.
Yeah, no, it's a different kind of character.
You know, and also, I was pretty... I don't know about you, but after that, the ending really infuriated me. I was not satisfied by the end of the movie.
Off mic, you'll have to tell me, because I've actually forgotten the ending of it.
The ending bothered me, and my only other critique is it's really long. I mean,
that was for sure.
We're post 2 hours here, and I really felt like they could have definitely trimmed it.
Definitely
it should have been a tight 90-minute movie, and it would have been pretty interesting.
And that's, to be honest, true of most indies.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I have to watch it. I'm intrigued now.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Oh, and last but not least, I went to something called The Big Picture, Hitchcock, over at the Hollywood Bowl, which was an amazing tribute to the music from Hitchcock films. There was the Hollywood Bowl orchestra performed, led by David Newman, composer David Newman. They performed to 12 Alfred Hitchcock movies, scenes from 12 movies. Nice. They performed the score live while the scenes played.
Wow.
And it was really, really amazing. And, you know, the thing that it sold me on is, you know, anytime Hitchcock movies play here in town, I try to see them on the big screen. They play so much better with an audience because it's like I'm sitting with a friend, I'm sitting with complete strangers, and we're all kind of smiling at the dark humor and the way that some of these scenes are executed. That was amazing, but it made me pull out my box set, and I checked out Rope, the infamous one take movie, which isn't really one take, but it's meant to be like one long continuous take. And I loved it. I hadn't seen it before, and I absolutely loved it. Jimmy Stewart. I think it's the first time he worked with Jimmy Stewart as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the performances are really strong.
And it's an amazing one. So you should check out Rope, Hitchcock.
Well, now we're going to go another film that's heavily influenced from my Nightmare USA book I always talk about. It's a big part of that, and the kind of, you know, one of those movies that you just wonder how this movie get made. Well, now wonder no more. We're going to find out. Okay, welcome back. And as we hinted at earlier today, we are ready to check into a little place called Motel Hell. Oh, hello. Motel Hell. That's how Eric likes to put it. We'd like to welcome the writer-producers of the film, Robert and Steven Jaffe. Welcome.
Hey,
thank you. Great to be here.
This is amazing because this is just one of those films, you know, obviously we come from the generation that discovered a lot of these films either on VHS or cable. And for a long time before the internet, you would always talk to people and be like, have you ever seen that movie with the pig mask and the chainsaw? You know, like, and you'd get so excited when somebody actually knew what the hell you were talking about. But here we are now in an age and era where we have a beautiful, pristine Blu-ray of Motel Hell coming out, courtesy of Scream Factory,
with phenomenal special features. The
great special features, great. And you guys just did a screening here, right?
35. Was it a 35 millimeter print?
Yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, it was gorgeous.
Pack screening.
That's the print I saw 2 years ago. I saw that print and I couldn't believe as a film print. And I went back and I kept asking people. That had to be a DCP, right? And they're like, I didn't see any grain in the print.
It was
or
beautiful.
scratches.
It was just like. It was gorgeous. You know?
It was beautiful. Yeah, I thought you were going to say you were in your parents' car at a drive-in. A lot of people told us that, and a lot of people say, "What's a drive-in?"
Yeah. Well, that's where the split is. But VHS is also. It's almost like we've never seen this film. You know, I mean, that's the thing. I've been watching some VHS recently and realizing just how bad some of these films look now
compared to their theatrical.
It's awful. It's weird muted colors, and this is like almost like a dark grim fairy tale. The way it both in tone, which I know is purposeful, but also the way it looks. It's
it was
magical
very
colors
colorful when I saw it at the 35 millimeter screening, where I didn't remember it being kind of so vivid and stark with all these different colors, but it was gorgeous.
We went out of our way to hire a really good DP, Tom Del Ruth, who worked with one of the greatest cameraman, Conrad Hall. And that was why we picked him. I mean, we really wanted it to look good. And you know, as I was saying before, a lot of people criticized us for making it look so good. but professional pride.
And you guys were young, right? Pretty young when you got that.
Yeah, we're still young.
Yeah, but I mean, you must have been really young. I'm just thinking like how you even got to a position to get that film made, because it's one of those films I think people who would have heard of it probably thinks it's like a grindhouse, like DIY. Some guys went and made Motel Hell, but it's not. It's a studio.
Yeah,
right?
no,
and you guys had a sizable budget with it too.
It was $3 million, and we slipped it in under the radar because of Michael Cimino and nearly bankrupting UA. Yeah. And remember Andy Albrecht, who was the head of the company? Andy Albrecht was a very strange, wonderful guy because he loved this movie, and he apparently had a pig farm. The head of United Artists. It was one of his personal favorites. We thought he was kidding. The head of United Artists.
That is pretty strange.
LA is a different place now. Although I was interviewing somebody last week, Bruce Campbell, and he owns a lavender farm. Yeah. And
in Oregon.
And he sells oil to Antonio Banderas, who owns a processing plant. And I was like, it just
that's very elegant.
Lavender
farm.
Excuse me, I have to put on my white gloves when I go out.
But now, let's go back to early days, because I'm always curious. Like, I've seen this extra feature, so I heard one of you answer this, but for people who haven't, the origins of horror, like where it starts for you guys, being interested.
$1 million movie. We watched so many great. I don't know. Oh, you're too young. Back east on weekends, was Channel 9 or something. They had something called $1 Million Movie, and the thing I never forgot was the score to it. I thought, God, that's really great music. And then years later, I saw Gone with the Wind and realized it was the soundtrack to Gone with the Wind. But $1 Million Movie showed everything from Rodin to what was the one with the Great Behemoth? I love that thing. It came out of the sea in New Jersey. One? No, it some weird tacky monster came crawling out of the Atlantic and I think raised hell at Atlantic City or something.
Not Humanoids from the Deep?
No.
That's way later.
No, but anyway, there was this amazing thing called $1 Million Movie, and that's I think where we saw all our horror movies. And then of course, Rod Serling came along, and and Outer Limits came along, but Robert really introduced me to it. He was much weirder than I was.
I'm repeating myself from the extras, but there's a follow-up from it, and that is that our father was a literary agent, and he was very, very wanting to get me into the history of cinema and really embrace it and understand and love it the way he did. And he showed me this book on the movies, this massive book, and he was sitting with me in a fatherly way, and we're turning pages, and we got to this shot from James Whale's 1931 Frankenstein with the little girl. And I looked at it, and it was like the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my entire life because it was so realistic. And he said, what's wrong? And I couldn't even tell him why I was so frightened. But that book just suddenly was like...
same reaction.
Oh, you were frightened by that too?
Separately,
Oh, my God.
But I know what you're talking about. What was weird about it was, first of all, the bolt in the monster's neck. I just couldn't deal with that.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was in broad daylight, not in shadows, freaked me out even more.
And it was so realistic. And that's really... The book was hidden in closets for decades so that I wouldn't have to go anywhere near it. And I once walked into the living room, and Elsa Lancaster in The Bride of Frankenstein was like full screen, scaring the hell out of... I just froze. And from that point, I was like, there was this kid in the neighborhood who his specialty was scaring everyone and telling scary stories. So between the three of those things, I was like this terribly fearful kid who stayed away from horror for a long time. And so the kind of the integration with horror is sort of in a way to exercise that fear.
I think that's common with a lot of horror kids.
Yeah,
it's attraction, repulsion.
Yeah,
I do think it's true. Yeah.
So I actually ran the 1931 Frankenstein for the first time, and it was so interesting because have you seen it recently?
Yeah,
Not
pretty recently.
maybe about 5 years.
I watched it last Halloween. I always kick off Halloween watching the Universal Monster movies.
But it was like, it's so interesting because there's humor in it. And I noticed that in the same way that we all want Vincent and Ida to kind of succeed, we want all the monsters to kind of like to succeed and not get caught. There's a slight aspect of that going on in Frankenstein also. And I just think that's such an important part of horror, that whole... And there was humor. I was shocked. It's like, yeah, there's always a little bit of humor.
Which carried through. I mean, when I saw Motel Hell the first time, it felt almost like a response, weirdly enough, to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It was.
It felt like I can't watch that again, but I like these elements, and I liked it to be funny. And can we also make it like, which is kind of a relief in a sense.
But it made it accessible for me as a kid, because like I was way too young to watch like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or anything, but I saw Motel Hell ridiculously young and loved it just because of the humor and how funny Ida presented herself and things like that. It made it far more accessible.
And it's told like a fairy tale because it draws you in, which is different from a lot of horror stories, right?
But the other thing that's interesting is that I've actually encountered people who were genuinely scared by it, which blew my mind because that was surprising.
I do think the scenes with the pig take you by surprise.
There are some.
I think that stuff with the pig killer,
I
think that comes out of left field a little bit and can be frightening.
Yeah.
But the actual farmers and the heads and things isn't scary. It's more like wondrous.
No, the head scared me.
Really? It scared a lot of people. The head scared people
The
too.
final stuff in the slaughterhouse was kind of freaky. I remember being kind of freaked out by that. So.
But what was the intent and the origin? Like, did this just whose head did this first idea pop into between you?
I think Steve is definitely going to have to get the credit for that one.
I don't know.
No, you actually broached the idea to me. It's yours.
Thanks.
It's your baby.
Do you remember seeing Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Like how you reacted to the film?
I was horrified by it.
Me too. Absolutely.
Wow.
But there's obviously a nod to Psycho with pushing the cars into the lake and the motel, of course.
Right. Had you stayed in a weird motel or anything like that?
No, I know this is going to sound strange, but this was really the origins of it were character driven. It was really Vincent and Ida, and I think Robert also had mentioned Sweeney Todd, and we kind of thought, well, Sweeney Todd with a Western twang and two lovable characters, and I wasn't kidding that night that Ida was based on a very interesting babysitter we had who was very sweet when our parents were there, and then when they left, put on wrestling and drank beer and
a movie babysitter.
Yeah, and I don't know. We were just marveling about how great Nancy Parsons and Rory.
Yeah,
and the thing that was so weird about Rory was we used to watch this Western. I still can't remember if it's called Sugarfoot or something, but. We love this guy. I mean, everybody liked John Wayne. I didn't even know who John Wayne was, but I liked Rory Calhoun because I saw this show on television every week. And, before we came here, I was looking on the net and I saw something, favorite lines from Motel Hell. And no one ever talks about, I think, the greatest lines, and I have to give Robert credit for this, in the astral projection scene when they harvest the rock band, and I'm going to misquote it, but when Vincent says, I can take no more credit for this than if the good shepherd in the great pilot in the sky had put a bolt of lightning through their heart. The way he delivers it, and the way Nancy looks at him, and then finally says, "Your spaceship awaits." I mean, that's my favorite scene in the whole movie. I just love it. It's so insane, and these kind of hick people coming out with hypnodiscs and saying, "We're going to take you to a place that is so far out that." Anyway,
I think that's what made you not hate them. I mean, they weren't killers because they were trying to be humane at the same time. So.
Oh, and they have a serious philosophy. I mean, we were big fans of Dr. Paul Ehrlich, who wrote this book called The Zero Population Growth, about overpopulation. So when he says, hell, I'm doing the world a favor, he's serious.
We've got a food shortage
Yeah.
and an overpopulation.
And
Kill
the meat
two birds.
tastes better if it's not scared when you kill it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't sinister. I mean, he has a real likability that taps into his career in westerns, and I think he was in a couple. He was in Night of the Lepus.
Yeah.
With the bunnies.
Right.
What was it like working with Roy? I mean, he seems
he
like
was
he
great.
fully absorbed the character. Did he like the film?
I got to tell you, the ambience on the set was like we were doing some great wholesome movie. I mean, we were such a family. Everybody loved coming to work, and it was kind of crazy because of that. As weird as the movie was, there was nothing weird about working on it, except for this neighboring munitions factory that 3 a.m. would set off these explosions, and we hear these weird screams, and we never found out what they were doing. It was probably a precursor to Blackwater or something.
But he had that charm, and really, he didn't have to.
Oh, he was
He didn't
great.
have to produce it. He was like that.
Did you guys have any say over choosing Kevin Connor as the director, or did either of you harbor any interest in directing, or no?
We had a say in everything. That was the great thing about UA being distracted with Heaven's Gate. It's like they just said, just go do this thing. I mean, we were always a little frustrated that we couldn't push the envelope even further in terms of weirdness. They wanted a certain amount of violence and gore to sell it. They had no idea what this was going to be, other than it's going to be a bloody
Pig with a chainsaw.
Yeah. But
the one thing that we were trying to avoid is it being perceived of as intentionally campy. It's just slightly different than something which is overtly
There's
campy.
a few scenes that I cringe at in terms
Do you think
of...
that comes somewhat from his tone and directing? It reminds me almost like you could have almost had Alec Guinness. What were the Ealing comedies when Alec Guinness is playing like a sinister character with lady killers or whatever,
No,
that tone.
I think that's...
I think, whatever shortcomings are in the movie, I think we should take responsibility for in the script. I mean... we did want an English director because, they seemed to know dark humor, certainly at that time, more than American directors did. And Kevin, I think, had worked on this Richard Attenborough movie that I thought was really cool called 10 Rillington Place.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he was like an assistant editor on that or something. And we thought, okay, well, he appreciated the humor and, but
Joe Dante auditioned for this. I wonder what that would have been like
that's
if he had
true.
done it. Would have been interesting.
He's he's
Wait
one
a
of the few
minute,
Americans
and
who do
Toby
get it.
Hooper did. Do you remember?
Wow.
I forgot about
I read that he was
Right off
attached
of
to it.
Chainsaw.
That seems like and then he made Eden Live, which is the camp version of Motel Hell. I mean, it's the over the top that doesn't work and everything. It's
Wow.
what happened there. Was there ever an actual chance of him doing it, or?
I don't remember what happened. It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
I guarantee he doesn't either. I guarantee that.
I'll take the fifth on that.
And also Harry Dean Stanton, I read, was somebody you guys were interested in.
right.
That would have been a very different movie.
You have done your homework.
At one point, yeah.
But I don't think that would have. I love Harry Dean. He's one of those actors
Yeah.
I love, but I don't think it would have been as good. He's a really interesting, but I think he has more pathos.
Yeah.
That might have darkened the whole.
He's much darker than Rory, and anyway, yeah.
Well, with Rory and Nancy, because they kind of sometimes there's just great chemistry when you put two actors together and they work in this movie. Did they come across as you envisioned, as you originally wrote? Did they add more to it? Or?
Better than we thought.
But I mean, the second we saw them doing what they were doing, it was like, yes, that's it. That was what we wanted.
Was there a lot of improvisation involved,
No.
or just sticking with the script? But just
nailed it. They just
sparkling on
totally.
screen.
They were
they
dead
were
on.
amazing, and I mean, look, she was to us what Melissa McCarthy is to people today. You know, it's funny to see if you watch. Oh God, what's that great Rob Reiner movie with James Caan and Kathy Bates? Misery. If you watch her performance in Misery, you see a lot of things that Melissa McCarthy may have gleaned from her. It's such a great film. God, it's amazing.
Yeah. No, and I loved her. She was great in Porky's. I mean, very funny lady.
Yeah. Before I forget, I really want to ask you, what is the most terrifying film from your perspective in terms of just pure exhilarating horror that you can think of that doesn't get its scares from gore or from what's it called when they're like,
jump scares?
Or jump scares.
I mean, I still think it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre because there isn't actually a lot of gore in that. There's almost none, and it's all psychological. Because I just saw it at the 40th anniversary, and Toby was being interviewed by William Friedkin, and watching it again, I've seen it a few times, hadn't seen it in a while, sat down there, and the first time he came around the corner, I actually moved back in my seat.
Yeah, it's coming.
This is an iconic character.
Leatherface, you mean?
Yeah. And there's something about his size against her size, and it just suddenly, I leaned back. And for me, that's a big scare for me, And so I think that film is still one of the few that, I also just saw Cannibal Holocaust, but that's more of a repulsion thing than it is a...
I was actually terrified by that brilliant title sequence with the flashbulbs going off.
I mean, and the voice, John Larroquette's voice. It's an incredibly made film.
And
every
just
couple...
the editing on Texas Chainsaw, where the gore is so implied, but you never actually see really anything.
Well, I mean, I still remember when he picks up that girl who's wearing the cutoffs and puts her on the hook. It's like, I'm sure I saw that hook on her, but I didn't.
But the way that it's edited, you see him, you see her body, you see her face, and then you get a long shot of it, but there's nothing like penetration-wise that you see. It's
just
so
like Halloween.
Smartly
Very
edited.
much like Halloween in that sense,
Because I'm asking the question because it's, to me, the ultimate in a horror film is one where you're confronting something which goes beyond your understanding, right? And it's not necessarily an evil, but it's something that's so palpably other that you don't even know how to deal with it. And I recently saw Human Centipede, and it has some moments at the beginning before the thing is done where it has that kind of quality. George R.R. Martin wrote a terrific novella called Sand Kings, and in it you kind of at the end you touch on where the bad guy who is the sort of protagonist in it is brought into this horrific world, and you know that it's just going to be the most frightening thing. My hair is going on end just thinking about that. I just crave that.
Well, that's more like Lovecraft and people who deal in the unknown.
I think that's it.
Where Stephen King always takes the known and somehow flips it on its head. The accessible or the childlike.
The one movie that will always make my hair stand up on end is one that I actually talked about in excess last week, Jacob's Ladder. Oh, yeah. And I don't even know why that is, but every single time I watch it, it still creeps me out just the same.
I mean, with a lot of the discussions we've had with people that have come on the show, I think what we pinpointed it to is the most effective horror is the thing that you as an audience member walk into and you can't have possibly imagined what you just saw. You were seeing something that you just never would have thought of and never could have possibly imagined, and that's what strikes a chord.
And you're the one who is confronting it as the viewer.
Exactly, because it's something you never would have been presented with otherwise, and you're being forced to kind of face it.
Which is also scary when it's something regular. For me, the experience you had with the Frankenstein book, I had a similar in a film was the ghost, the clown in Poltergeist. The image of that clown then resonated. I couldn't see anything like that when I was young, or anything that would even be near a bed, or where your legs would be over the bed. You had to get in the bed. That was that moment for me because that was that clown was just. And I'm not somebody who even thinks about clowns or is scared of clowns. Just that clown was terrifying. The way Steven Spielberg or whoever directed that film, I can't remember, directed that. Sorry, why did I have to be nicer to Toby on the show today?
You should.
Yeah, okay, sorry. But but it was just really brilliantly put together. Cujo has that great moment at the start where the kid can't get into his bed. He has to run and jump.
Right. Hit the light and run.
And I think that reflects a lot of the experience of when you're young and
For me, it was, I was brought up Catholic, so for me, it's all the religious stuff.
Exorcist was very.
I can't, as a little kid, you're like, hey, is the devil going to come after me if I don't pray or if I'm not good? I don't know. So it's interesting. Your life experiences and the way you're brought up definitely affect what personally scares you.
And it's also maybe based on your referencing Exorcist, because I remember when I saw the first scary moment in Exorcist, it was kind of like a psychic violation where I was like confronted on a much more intimate level with something which was so ugly and potentially dangerous that those kinds of things, I think.
And
also.
taboo shattering. I mean, you're just seeing, the first time you watch it, you're seeing this child do these things and your brain, it feels uncomfortable. It's scary stuff.
It's a great film.
Do you guys stay up to date with the genre, or is it the kind of thing you aren't as interested in seeing the new works?
Oh, no, we see...
I have a lot of catching up to do.
Uh-huh.
And I'm motivated now.
Yes,
we'll make you a good list.
Yeah, that'd be a good list of catch-up films.
72 episodes before this that you can listen to. Recommendations. Actually, I wanted to go back a little bit and just, because you were saying that you were talking about how your father was an advocate for introducing you to the world of cinema. So, at what point for both of you, was it a given that this is the path you wanted to choose, somehow involved in films, whether it be writing, producing? How did that kind of happen for you guys?
Absolutely not. And I actually I didn't get the cinema thing from him until I was in high school, and he took me to see Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
John Huston.
He was we lived in Stamford, Connecticut when it was a little hick town, and he commuted to New York, and he'd always bring a book back from one of his clients. So I thought of it as more, read books. There's worlds there that you need to explore. And I didn't get the cinema thing until, high school, when he said, you're old enough to have a glass of Jack Daniels and see Treasure of Sierra Madre with me. And it was great.
Programmed really early because we went in and saw a Broadway musical.
Oh, Robert was singing and dancing all the time. I'm serious. I couldn't relate to it, but
I don't know about the dancing.
I just told them about how I always went to musical theater camp when I was in high school, and it was like one of my favorite memories, and they were laughing at me.
Yeah, that's all right.
No, it's great.
But now there's two of you, so you can bond.
I'll sing and dance with you.
Hey, let's put on a show.
Okay, deal.
Now that wasn't your first film. Now, when I was researching you guys, I've always found Donald Cammell's career fascinating because he definitely had an outsider artist type viewpoint to cinema. I'm curious to hear how Demon Seed was created as a film at all, because you guys were Dean Koontz.
Robert Dean Koontz discovered this kind of B novel of his.
Well, it's
B
not,
plus.
Yeah,
B plus.
Yeah, well.
And he wrote this amazing screenplay that got into a bidding war. I mean, everybody went nuts for it. And that's how that happened.
And how much before Motel Hell was that?
2 years maybe.
Well, Demon Seed was 1975, and Motel Hell was 1980.
But it helped propel you guys to get.
Didn't hurt.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. In terms of Donald, I had a friend I was going to school with who turned me on to performance for the first time, and it was like I was blown away. And I always like to think that Donald was as much a part of that as Nick Rogue, and I always hear things both ways in terms of who was really more responsible for.
I think Nick Rogue was.
Well, I think the visuals and the editing style, I'm sure, were Nick. I mean, because they come through in every one of his other films.
And he was a cameraman, a brilliant one.
And Donald was really helpful because he did add credibility to it and took it out, because he was an artist, he took it out of the Dan Melnick originally wanted Sylvia Christel to star in it. So you she was sort of a, how shall we put it, hard R actress.
Okay.
Oh.
And
Julie Christie's like the complete opposite.
yes, exactly.
But it's one of the great horror performances she delivers, I think. I think it's
phenomenal.
a
She's
really
very
interesting
good.
role.
I have to see it again.
It's a film,
It's a great
parts of it
film.
will have clunky because of technology, but then there's other parts that are genuinely disturbing and menacing, and the ideas are really strong, I think.
Yeah.
This is really interesting to me because there are certain things in an original property that you can understand how a studio would want to mine those aspects which could translate into being able to being sold commercially. And then there are other aspects which are sort of the essence of what the book is really like and what is the essential kind of milieu and quality of it. And the original book had much more of a lurid sense to it. And it was actually appropriate. And I actually, I'm sorry to say this, I thought Julie did an amazing job, but at the same time, it was brought into a kind of a more respectable, somber sort of
Because
quality.
of the kind of actor.
And it needed to be over the top more.
Interesting.
And
That's interesting.
That's what the book was. The book was
Right.
really lurid. And I thought it was so cool, the idea of this computer who was not only in love with this woman, but sexually in love with her.
Right.
And that was delivered. It was in the movie, but it was sort of one step removed from the visceral aspects that I would
That's
have liked.
interesting. So it became more of an A movie where it might have suited being a B movie.
Yes.
That's interesting.
I find it really boring. No, I'm serious because I remember his script, and that was a page turner. The movie is like
Dulled down.
Valium for me. I not one of my favorites.
Interesting. And now, were you on set at all for that film, or that was just writing?
yeah.
and then-
I was on set, and normally I wouldn't have been. Let's put it that way, because it had gone through a lot of revisions, and I didn't feel as connected with the actual end movie in relationship to what I had originally imagined it to be. That happens all the time,
Right.
But it's still fun.
Interesting.
It was a fun time to be at MGM because on the next soundstage, Scorsese was doing New York, which was pretty wild to just sneak onto the set and watch that going on. And what else? Oh, De Laurentiis was making King Kong.
Wow.
Man.
I mean,
Big movies. They're both huge movies, yeah.
it was crazy. And I remember they still had the back lot on the other side of Overland, west of Overland, where Sony is today. And the neighbors were marching in the street because all the extras at night would keep them up yelling, Kong, Kong, Kong.
That's fantastic.
And Jessica Lange screaming, ah!
Wow.
Anyway, it was a fun time to be there. Would you mind if we went back to Motel Hell for a second?
Yeah, of course.
One of the things that we did want to talk about when we were saying that, how enamored we are of Vincent and Ida, we've always felt there was more life to them than just in the movie. And, for the past, I don't know, half a year, maybe longer, we'd been... this is an exclusive.
We got an exclusive.
You're about to-
here, so that's
I'm
good.
ready to go, guys.
Well,
Let's hear it.
I've got a lot of questions about where you're heading, but I want to hear you say it first.
Well, obviously there is one of the greatest renaissance in creative filmmaking taking place on cable television.
Right.
Unlike, I mean, the only other time there was such interesting abundance of talent was in the 70s and late 70s or early 80s, and now it's on television, and it's so exciting. And I don't even using the word binge watching is so weird to me. If I want to see something, I fucking see it.
Right.
Can I swear?
Yeah.
Fucking smart.
Okay. I fucking see it at 3 a.m, 4 a.m. I mean, I don't watch sports except when the World Cup is on because my wife is from Spain and it's our patriotic duty. But other than that, it's like movies, and reading. And anyway, we had been thinking that what would be really cool is not to remake Motel Hell or do a sequel, but to kind of re-explore these two characters as they would be living today in like a 10-part limited show, sort of like Fargo, the way that that really wasn't. It wasn't obligatory to have seen the movie. It's nice to see it, and in fact, I think it's probably more freeing to watch Fargo not having seen Fargo, because the first 2 episodes for me, I'm trying to pry myself loose from the Coens, and then it finally, I had
that reaction with Hannibal. The first series I struggled, and the second season was one of the most fun seasons.
A lot of these shows, the first 2 episodes, it's like, oh, I don't know, where's this thing going?
Yeah.
I was talking to Steve Rebello about Bates.
He was our guest 2 episodes ago.
I know that.
He's a great guy.
He's a great guy.
It was a great interview. Yeah.
But I was saying, have you seen Bates Motel? And he said, no, I've been avoiding it. I said, well, you really shouldn't, because I've seen Psycho I don't know how many times. It's one of my favorite movies. I mean, it sounds silly saying that, but it is. And I didn't want to see it, and my wife is looking at it, and she said, yeah, watch this. And all of a sudden, I tuned into it, and I couldn't believe it. The acting's brilliant. The directing's brilliant. The writing's brilliant. The cinematography. I mean, it's like perfect. Perfect. I mean, I can't believe how they pulled it off.
I'm pretty sure Steven quoted you 2 episodes saying, a friend told me that I would like it,
That's interesting.
He's been reluctant. I'll watch it. He said a friend was telling me that I should watch it, and they know
that's
my
so funny.
I think part of the reason it works, casting Vera in that role, but it's also
so
because that role didn't exist. That role has never been fleshed out in Vera. But no one's watched part 4.
By part 4, but...
But most people aren't watching the part 4.
Let's face it, you're expecting some grisly young version of what was up in the upstairs bedroom.
She's genuinely caring. She's trying to look out for this person.
And she's
doing everything she can to make his life better.
The nuances in her face.
Yeah, she's a great actress.
When she it's not a double take. I don't know what it is, but it's like something went off in her cerebral cortex that was dangerous. And the kid, oh my God, he's so
Freddie Highmore's great.
Freddie Highmore, that's
incredible.
I've talked about it a lot on the show. My only issue with the show, I like everything about it except for the peripheral drug story in the town, which just feels a little
anytime they deviate from
weak.
them too.
And it happened in Twin Peaks too. It happened in a lot of shows where they have that backstory that's just like a little limp compared to what the key characters are,
Well, it's true. But anyway, in any event, back to why we're revisiting it.
Guys.
We just kind of think it's the right time to do this. The only thing that we're a little anxious about is whether or not there's a fan base that would respond to this idea, because if we were to ever do this, we'd have to convince MGM TV that there's enough people out there that would really embrace this and not redoing it, but just taking these people to. What's so cool about Vincent and Ida is this philosophy of theirs. I mean, obviously they have a modus vivendi. They have to go out and hunt people to keep that food chain going. So there's always going to be that. On the other hand, what's so cool about Vincent is that he has a way of addressing the social and political problems of the world without it seeming didactic.
Right.
Almost the horror version of Archie Bunker, where Norman Lear could deal with any social problem, any bigoted thing, and people could take it. And we just think there's so much potential for Vincent and Ida to what?
I want to know.
Would it be an origin story or something just they're already up and running, or would they be starting there? Hard to know.
What we've just imagined is it's up and running.
Yeah,
and it's in an.
I mean, their first victim is it's a very prominent banker who's kind of swindled a lot of folks out of money, and he's fleeing the country, and it's
it takes place,
which is great because instantly you get the audience on their side.
Totally.
It's justifiable.
Totally,
the 1% is taken out.
I'm wondering, can you imagine that there'd be a sense of differentiation with Motel Hell and the tone that we're imagining and all the other horror that's already out now?
You mean in terms of television?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. Right now we're in kind of we're in what I would call a golden age of television. Not just horror, but just television is blowing away what's at the cinema these days. You know, it's just the quality of it. And in the last 2-3 years, we've seen such a rise in particular in horror properties. And it's amazing because, you know, television is now the new remake It's Okay to Like. Like, for some reason, horror fans were like very reluctant anytime you mentioned remaking a title. It's like,
unless it's Rosemary's
why
Baby.
are they going to redo that movie? They can't, blah, blah, blah. But now all of a sudden it's like, people would have gotten nuts over a Psycho remake, which they did, but Bates Motel is all right. Silence of the Lambs remake, no, but Hannibal's okay.
And
now all of a sudden it's okay.
Dexter.
People are getting excited about The Omen, which is
Yeah,
coming
there's
to
an
TV
Omen series.
next-
I mean, they're going to try
For
everything at this point.
Lifetime.
For Lifetime, yeah.
I saw that and I was just like, really? Lifetime? But it just shows everyone's getting in on that.
But I gotta say,
Oh,
my mom
even-
called me up to tell me about how excited she
really?
was about
That's
it.
interesting.
So it's
interesting.
apparently working.
And the audience, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of people that I know, younger people that watch Bates Motel that have never seen Psycho.
Absolutely.
And were mad at me when I told them how.
Again, just like the
I was like,
movie.
you
the-
didn't know what Norman's going to do eventually?
I would say, like Motel Hell, the film, though, the trick will be the tone, because most of the shows that are popular are dark.
Very
you know?
dark.
And so it's finding how you can pepper in the humor. True Blood obviously would have been one that went off and went too camp, and it's
Too
pretty much
campy, but-
unwatchable after the first couple of seasons. It started strong, and so it's finding, once you find your tone, and you know whether it has to replicate the film exactly. And then casting is those two leads, if that's your show. So instantly Woody Harrelson pops into my head. Because, my God, who's more likable than Woody?
I don't know. See,
And
I
the
don't think he's
irony
charming
that he's a
enough.
vegan.
Oh, right, which would be great, right? That's too perfect.
I don't know. After True Blood, I don't think he's charming. Or sorry, where were we? Oh, True Detectives. I don't think he's charming enough anymore.
No, that was just a good role.
I know,
That was
but
a great,
still.
great
That
performance.
good.
Billy
I
Bob
don't think
would be
he's charming.
Yeah, Billy Bob.
awesome.
Billy Bob.
Billy Bob would
Billy
do
Bob and Melissa McCarthy.
Well,
Yes.
there you go, yeah.
Okay, see, Billy Bob.
That's easy.
He's there.
Yeah.
I
So,
see that.
just to follow up on the idea of continuing Motel Hell, I had a few quick questions regarding, you know, obviously we're the type that discovered this later on, but what was the initial response when the movie was released? Like, how did people respond to it? Was there ever
A lot of people
thought of a
didn't talk
sequel?
to us.
Oh, really?
A lot of people thought we had crossed a line that. No, I remember there were. I can't name
No, but
names.
you're not talking about normal people who would be going to see movies.
People
You're talking
in
about
the-
people in the business.
People
We're
in
not-
the business.
No, but that's not.
wouldn't
Well, I suppose,
wouldn't
yeah,
talk
you
to
could-
us.
you could-
It's like, are you guys out of your mind? I mean, somebody said, you know, I would take your names off this. We had,
Wow.
you know, incredible pride about this. You know, it's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You know, but
Did you get many people the other way who would come? Any important people came up to you and said, "Actually, this is really fun"? Or
young people liked it. It's like, you know, that's. I remember when we went to the very first screening of 2001, and all the Hollywood executives and older producers were walking out and saying, "Oh, it's the most boring thing ever," and it's like, are you fucking
boring
nuts?
is never a word.
Did you
That would come up in Motel Hell.
did you not see what was just?
But
You
they
know.
didn't take acid.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
that's
right.
right.
That's right.
But what about the audiences? Did you go see it with some crowds just to
Oh
get
yeah,
a feel?
we actually there was a screening in Chicago in an old vaudeville music hall that
It was a talkback
It was
movie,
a
that's for
yeah, it was
sure.
definitely a talkback movie in a pretty rough part of town, and I just remember you know, this couple coming out and saying, I love seeing stupid white people do dumb things to each other.
for a change. That must be nice.
So no, we had a couple of fun screenings with it.
And at the time, did you guys like after its release? Was there any toying with the idea of a sequel right after?
No.
No.
It never occurred to us
One-off.
at all.
How do you feel about? I remember the first time it was available on DVD, it was paired up with Deranged.
Oh, I hated that they would do that. It really.
Totally different.
I
movies
actually
other
think
than-
that's why I didn't see it for so long, because I had seen Deranged. I remember didn't like the tone was so nasty.
You can't get much more insulting than
It's a
putting
pretty
I
nasty.
two
assume they
movies.
didn't give you a choice on that. They just put it out and then you heard later.
That's true.
Yeah.
I just found thematic link and threw it out. Probably,
Yeah.
but-
Well,
interesting.
the other thing, I mean, you know, I had talked to you earlier on the show that I would love to do this epic article one day because I know at least 6 or 7 directors that at one point were attached to remake Motel Hell. And I want to do this article about their journey to remake Motel Hell. And it's interesting to me. I mean, were you guys involved over the years? And I think now talking to you and talking about the idea of doing a TV thing, the importance is getting, the right tone.
We
so
actually,
if that's the problem with remaking, it was impossible to find the right person.
Thank goodness. We wrote I thought a pretty good remake script, not a sequel, not a prequel. We just wanted to redo it in a very outrageous way, and I'm glad we didn't do it because I think this. Well, we'll see if there's enough fans out there. I was talking to Chris Alexander, and I said, "Do you think we should do a Facebook page and see if anybody wants to endorse it?" So I don't know. We might.
All right.
We might.
Well, I mean, has it dropped officially yet? The Blu-ray?
Yeah, I think it
just came out.
So I
think it did.
I think you'll find that there's a lot of love, but that's probably not what will convince the studio. I guess it'll just have to be, your take on it.
Money talks.
Yeah,
we'll see. A lot of reviews. I was amazed on this particular release online.
Yeah. Well, did you? Now, were you involved at all in getting it to Scream Factory, or did they approach you guys? I'm always curious how they.
Are you kidding?
No.
Out of the blue, we get a call. We'd like to interview you, and when's it coming out? Oh, in about a month. So
that sounds like their turnaround.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were thrilled that they did it, and it's such a beautiful job they did. So
Yeah, they take a lot of pride in. I mean, these are fans that run this company, so having it in their hands is getting a proper release for it.
It's not the first time we've said this on the show, but they're kind of like the criterion of horror.
Yeah, they absolutely are.
That's great.
They are.
Yeah, they care. And I also saw on IMDb that you also did Time After Time. We don't have to go in depth, but I love that film. So I think
Thank you.
I think that's one of the best time travel films. It's fun.
It is.
And it goes with my theory about Malcolm McDowell, which is he can't be cast as a villain. He's boring and like a thug as a villain, but you make him the good guy, and suddenly he's fascinating.
We had such a hard time convincing Warner Brothers to hire him because
was this right after Caligula or
no? I think it was after Clockwork Orange.
Oh,
they just couldn't see him in a romantic role, and we thought he was great, and it stands the test of time.
Yeah.
What's funny is that Mary Steenburgen went on to do. Oh God, my brain isn't working today. Back to the Future, and we ran into her, and she said, Steven said that if it weren't for Time After Time, Back to the Future wouldn't have been made. I'm trying to process that.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
Is that a compliment or
just your movie royalties, right?
Yeah.
No, it's a great film. I can't remember. We were talking about a different time travel film recently in the horror thing, and that's why I think Time After Time came up.
Time Crimes?
It could have been, yeah. And also, obviously, there's a film that you worked on that, and I'm only asking this because I've never gotten to hear about it, but I think it was way ahead of its time. It was the Catherine Bigelow's Strange Days. I feel like that's a film that when I saw it at the time, I didn't know how to take it because it's so severe.
Oculus. I mean,
right, but seeing it years later, I remember thinking, geez, this film was really ahead of
it was
its
ahead.
I hate to say it, but I really nothing against you saying it, but ahead of its time just like breaks my heart.
Right.
Because we thought it was going to be, huge, and apparently it was a little too advanced. But I think it's a great film. And
I think it works as a really dark thriller. It almost like
it's great.
reminds me of Peckinpah in terms of the tone when the experience of rape through this visual device, and it's bleak, but I think that's a film that our audiences would probably, if they revisited, might be surprised at how good a film that is.
Well, I kind of thought that Rupert Murdoch should have re-released it after Avatar didn't win, but Hurt Locker won because he could have had best of both worlds.
Right.
I wonder how it would have played remastered as 3D.
It's too tough to take. You couldn't.
Too intense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's too intense
but
for a lot of people.
That's what it's about, though. If you think about it.
No,
it's a great movie. I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud of all the movies I made with Catherine. And you're talking about True Blood. I couldn't watch it because I know they were saying, well, we're giving a lot of credit to Near Dark, and I'm looking, I'm thinking, I think you're stealing from it.
Well, a lot of people, we've had Lance on the show before, and
Lance is
a
great.
lot of people, and also Severin is one of the great vampire characters ever. I think the bar scene in there is one of the best shot vampire scenes.
That
in the
bar
history of
was a funny thing. It was one of the few sets we actually built out near Magic Mountain. There's some ranch out there. I forget what it's called. We built this thing, and then the night before, Catherine and I went out there with I don't know how many bottles of booze, and I said, "I got an idea. We're gonna do kind of a smell-o-vision treatment on this bar. We're gonna break all these bottles of booze all over the floor, so when the actors come in, it's gonna smell like a real bar."
Yeah, that's awesome.
And they couldn't. I think Bill Paxton actually thought it. How come I don't know about this bar? But yeah, it was great. A lot of fun, and they had just come from Aliens, and Catherine's idea was so brilliant, just to get these three, Jeanette and Lance and Bill, because they had already bonded before.
Right.
And the young kid was Jason Miller, speaking of The Exorcist, his son.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
What is it? Joshua Miller? Is that
Yeah.
his name? Yeah. He's great.
And
Great character.
so that was fun.
Yeah, that's a film that's aged brilliant. And Eric Raven wrote that, right, with her. Eric and, so I'd love to, one day we'll talk to Catherine. Catherine probably would never make a genre film again, though, I would imagine.
I
Never say never.
I guess Strange Days is tough because you make something on such a big level and it's a really strong film, and then it doesn't connect, I guess, at the time.
Well, yeah. It's reconnecting now, but
Right.
anyway.
It's strong.
Well, you want to tell us a little bit about, you guys have a new documentary project, and you've worked on it for quite a number of years. What's this journey about?
Well, I'd been a fan of Gahan's work from, I don't know, when I was like 11 years old, and
Gahan Wilson.
Gahan Wilson. And
Cartoonist, correct?
Oh, yeah. Could you explain a little bit about him? For if
well,
anyone's never heard?
yeah, sure. He's like Charles Adams in color. He at the New Yorker, they think of him as the heir apparent to Charles Adams. And I don't know if you had told me about him, or was my weird adventure in the woods where my best friend had just celebrated his first communion. I think that was it. Anyway, by bringing his father's Playboy out into the woods, and I'm seeing very, very nude women. Actually, in 1962, it was a topless woman swimming underwater. That's why I like Sea Hunt so much. After that, anyway, so I'm looking at that, and then I turn the page, and then I see this crazy Gahan Wilson cartoon where I think Leonardo da Vinci and an aide are like looking over this castle parapet, and there's a atom bomb going off in the distance, and I think the guy said, "So Leonardo, what if they keep using this?" or something like that. But it wasn't the punchline as much as the insane imagery and the colors, and it's like eye candy for the demented, and I just fell in love with it. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know how to pronounce his name. I didn't care. I just, from that point on, I wanted to get a Playboy magazine, not just to see, naked women, but to see this incredible guy. That's all I wanted to see every month. And after I made Ghost, I remember my assistant came in and said, "Gee, you've got a pretty big hit movie. You can meet anybody you want right now. Who do you want to meet?" And most people say, "I want to meet the head of Bank of America," or "I want to meet a movie star. I want to just, what do? I say, find Gahan Wilson. I want to meet this guy." And 5 minutes later, he was on the phone, and we struck up this friendship, and we tried to. I always had this dream of a Gahan Wilson animated film, but I don't know if the town and animation is ready for something as original as that. And I had seen Crumb and a good friend of mine who was the editor on Ghost, Walter Murch, had worked on Crumb. And I'd shot a couple of, just kind of casual interviews with Gahan, and I showed it to Walter, and I said, do you think I should do this? And he said, yes, absolutely. It's his fault. Anyway, so...
And if he was here, he'd be standing up right now.
No, he's... Well, when he saw...
Yes,
he edits standing. That's why I love Bill.
Yes, he does. But when we got all these great reviews in the New York Times, the LA Times, Village Voice, I mean, every review has been just phenomenal. Walter said, okay, I'll take credit for it. And he, the problem is that I thought this was going to be, 6 months, a year, and
documentaries take time.
Oh, God. Yeah, well, I was friends with the late great Les Blank. I don't know if you saw any of his movies.
The Werner Herzog one,
and the Blues According to Lightning Hopkins. I mean, he was genius, and I finally had the nerve to show him this, and he had just made this incredible movie about this. Yeah, All in This Tea. Oh, it's great. One of the greatest documentaries ever made. It's so good. Anyway, so I said, so Les, how long did it take you to make this? And he said, well, it took me 10 years to realize I was making the wrong movie. And so I kind of thought after 8 years I got off easy. But I couldn't have had the confidence to do it without Robert. And, after coming off K-19, I really wanted to get back to a feeling of personal filmmaking and documentaries. And so the two of us, we bought, these Panasonic cameras. It was before HD. So, that was kind of weird.
It was just the beginning of HD.
Yeah. But unfortunately, the technology was not. Anyway,
editing was very cumbersome.
It was very cumbersome, and the speed changes are weird when you go to the DCP. I mean, I actually think it looks the best on DVD or streaming, which is weird. I can't watch it in the theater because sometimes some of the cartoons have this like staggered effect, and it's because of the speed conversion, which drives me nuts. But anyway, this is boring. Nobody wants to hear about it. But
is it streaming on Netflix or anywhere, or somewhere like?
Oh,
that?
it's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. Yeah. It's on
Film Buffs is the main distributor. For
okay.
Yeah.
And it's called Born Dead, Still Weird.
Gahan Wilson, Born Dead, Still Weird, because he was born dead and revived.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And how fitting for someone who's known as the master of macabre.
Yeah.
And we knew that we were going to have to populate it with some, big name stars, but we had no idea who was a Gahan Wilson fan. So we kind of went on this weird fishing expedition saying, like, gee, if someone else were making this, who would you like to see as guest stars? And it's like, okay, Neil Gaiman, Stephen Colbert, Louis Black, who else,
Del Toro,
and Guillermo. Yeah. I'd send these letters out, and I'd wait, and then someone would call, like, all out of the blue. Stephen Colbert's assistant called and said, Stephen loves Gahan and has a very personal connection, and when would you like to interview him?
That's a great story.
And I said, I'll be on the next plane. And it kind of happened like that. It was amazing. Bill Maher's in it. Randy Newman's in it. I mean, I was floored how many fans he had and has. And so that was kind of fun. And
it's funny how that totally mirrors like you making Motel Hell, and that there's going to be the same thing. It's going to be this group of fans and people who find this work and it's personal to them.
Well, you were talking earlier about horror and humor, and there's a whole section that Guillermo introduces in the documentary talking about Gahan's work, and then Gahan explains it while he's watching Bride of Frankenstein. And anyway, we're very proud of it. It took a lot of time and labor, a lot of favors, and a lot of our savings. And I'm
going to cry. Stop.
I made a movie for Mel Brooks, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was the sequel to The Fly, but meeting Mel, I really appreciated Brooks' films and how, I mean, I think now he's gotten the recognition for it, but before Miramax, they were making the greatest independent movies, bar none. Right. Elephant Man, The Fly. I mean, just
and he obviously had a great eye for talent, because when he talks about meeting David Lynch for the first time, he says it was Jimmy Stewart from Mars walked in, and then he saw something in that. He saw something. It would have been difficult for most people to see something in Eraserhead, especially in a studio level, and think that person could make such a big. I mean, it's one of the most beautifully shot films ever made.
It's exquisite.
And
Freddie Francis.
Freddie Francis.
But you're right. That really does speak well for Mel.
That takes a real eye.
I
think.
But anyway, so I call up Mel and I say, I'd love you to see this movie. And first thing he says is, you didn't put your money in it, did you? And I'm thinking, how am I going to say this? And I said, well, yeah, I did. And then for like 5 minutes, I had to move the phone because the yelling of expletives was so loud. And finally, when it stopped, I said, look at it. If you don't like it, you can take me off the Brooks Films alumnus banner. Anyway, he says, all right, I'll look at it. And 2 days later, he calls. He says, it's great. And I'll deny I ever said this. Of course, I'm betraying you right now. He said, there are exceptions to the rule about putting money into your own film. You never could have pitched this and sold it to anybody. They never would have gotten it. It's a great film. And he actually gave me a quote, which is on the DVD whenever that's coming out. We got Stan Lee in it. I mean, it's the kind of movie you guys would love.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it. I'm excited.
Is it only available digitally now? You mentioned when the DVD comes out.
Yeah, it's on VOD now, right?
Yeah. Okay. Which is interesting because, we are going through an undeclared distribution revolution.
Yes.
And it's exciting. It's also very frustrating because no matter what anyone says about social media, and believe me, with the great reviews we've gotten, with all the, reaching out we did on Facebook and Twitter, it still takes the kind of money that Harvey Weinstein throws out to get a documentary seen by people.
You mean theatrically?
Anyway, theatrically or on video on demand.
I don't think people have really figured out how to market video on demand yet. Not that I have any ideas on that. But video on demand in general is kind of this whole new beast that kind of just came out of nowhere, and no one in the film industry really knows what to do with it yet. So.
Well, sadly, it's also one of the greatest expenses in terms of making a movie is marketing it. And it's always driven me crazy how much it costs to do it, and especially when you don't get a good campaign. And that is another thing, for all the years I've been making movies and Robert, it's just...
It's more important now than ever because anyone can make a movie. So there's so many more... There's more
clutter.
I mean, if I had the money, I would have been putting spots on cable TV. Right. It's... But anyway, we love the film. We're totally biased. A lot of the reviewers, even Bill Moyers, flipped for it. He wrote me one of the most amazing letters. Robert Redford saw it, loved it.
Is there a trailer online? We'll post the trailer.
We'll post it so people can find the trailer and the links online to it. For sure.
Yeah, and keep us in touch about the series too, like how you guys, because we'll definitely try to get the word out on our end, because I think there's going to be a lot of... I think you'll also get this will be talked about a lot more just coming back into circulation like this, because it's never looked like this before.
Right.
Yeah.
And people who haven't seen the print I've seen
have
probably not seen this movie, because on VHS it's not the same movie.
This Blu-ray is close to.
Blu-ray is really amazing.
It's a real deal,
It really is. And I do love possessing a great movie on DVD. I'm sorry. I mean... I don't mind streaming it, but if it's... I have a collection of, what I think are some of the greatest movies ever made.
You're sitting in the room with a
that's
lot of diehard collectors here.
There's a reason this says collector's edition on the top, and everybody listening has this compulsion.
Well, it was really funny when I was making Strange Days. Jim was telling me about his Laserdisc collection. He said, they're going to stop making these, so you should scoop up every Laserdisc you can. And I did. I have a huge Laserdisc line. But there are movies that aren't on DVD that are on Laserdisc.
And some of the features that I have on my Laserdiscs don't go to the DVDs or any of the other formats. So I have
that's true.
features nobody else does. But I just got, I was so excited about this one, that little thrift shop in downtown, it's not downtown, on Magnolia in Burbank. It's called
you pay more than $1?
It was $3, but I got The Cook, the Thief, the Wife, and Her Lover on Laserdisc, and it was yesterday. And I was like,
the other thing that's kind of weird, I probably shouldn't say this, but what the hell? A lot of them are not copy protected.
Really?
They didn't know how to do it.
I also have discovered a lot of like the consignment, or like Goodwill and Salvation Army, they will just stick them in with the records for like a buck a piece. So you got to go through the records to find your laser.
Yeah, and let me be clear. I don't like. I absolutely abhor piracy. And when I say cheerfully that they aren't copy protected, let's face it. When we're trying to sell someone on a film, we have to make a sizzle reel of existing clips and that. Right. We're not making money off it, but we need to be able to put something together to show a studio executive or a financier, and I don't know how you do it otherwise.
Right.
So there. Just want to be clear about that.
It's not like The Expendables 3, where a whole film is being leaked. That's a very different scenario.
Leaked is an appropriate word.
Right. The word of the day or week, I guess. Either way, we're excited for our audience to see this film again, because I think quite a few of them might not have seen it before.
Some have, some haven't. But people seem. I posted a picture of Farmer Vincent, and people got excited today. So you got the right audience listening.
Excellent.
Hopefully. And anything else in the pipeline you guys want to talk about, or right now it's the doc, Motel Hell, and.
There's a couple of things we're working on, but we're very old-fashioned, superstitious. That until it's real. I mean, how many people do you meet in this business who say, "I got this, I got that," and you never hear from them or it again? And I'd rather wait until it's real, and then we'll come back.
One of my friends told me the movie is never actually taking place until you're holding the DVD in your hand. Up to that point, everything can go wrong and the money's going to get pulled until you're holding that DVD. There's no movie. So,
Wow. Well,
that means you're still waiting for this one. Your own film is not finished, so get back to work.
Comes out.
We have our copy, fortunately.
Okay, that's a good one.
Wow. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Robert and Steven, for joining us.
Thank you.
It was really fun.
Check out Motel Hell on Blu-ray, Scream Factory.
What do we have on tap for next week?
That's Elric. Is Jim coming in?
Yeah, it's meant to be Jim Warnowski.
I am so going to talk.
I'm going to bring up my Boogie Nights analogy and see if he enjoys that. In Boogie Nights, I might not say it on the show, so I'll say now how Burt Reynolds' character has to go through that shift where he's an artist when it was film, and then he has to start making video, and he has to make. And if you look at Warnowski's career, it's kind of the ultimate viewpoint of that, because he was making these quite ambitious movies, and then suddenly has to make 6 films a year now just to make a living. A lot of these directors have to make some soft-core films, some like cheap Corman sci-fi. So it's just an interesting career, which I don't think there's many quite like it that made that transition. Yeah. Now, I might have the guts to say this. This is an exact analogy.
It will be well padded.
But hopefully that'll be happening, and we have some cool stuff going into.
A lot of stuff going into the Halloween season.
Yeah, we're pretty much booked into the start of October. So
yeah, it's going to get pretty nutty.
Yeah.
So all right. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for making this happen, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Totally fine.